In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Last Sunday, as part of the All Age Celebrate service, we did some unpacking of the Good Samaritan story. We were trying to restore its impact by reminding ourselves that whereas to us a Samaritan is someone who helps others, to the people who first heard Jesus tell the story, a Samaritan was someone very different, someone other, alien, unclean, someone to be suspicious of, a person to despise. It's one of many biblical words and ideas that over the centuries have acquired a different meaning, have come to carry a different connotation from the ones they carried in Jesus' lifetime. There's another of these words in today's gospel, the word that's at the heart of Peter's declaration. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. We can't help hearing this as a declaration of Jesus' divinity. We hear in it the echo of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. For us, Messiah is simply another name for Jesus. But to the disciples, it meant something else. Something far more earthly, more political, more warlike even. It conjured up the golden age of Israel, the reign of King David. The word we know as Messiah in Hebrew meant the anointed king. Remember how Samuel anointed David? The one who would be sent by God to free Israel from oppression. At that time, the oppression of Rome, and to bring justice and peace to the whole world. By declaring Jesus as Messiah, Peter was nailing his colours to the mast of what would inevitably be a turbulent uprising, a revolution, not simply a spiritual change, a spiritual revolution. Seen in this slide, I suppose it's inevitable it would be Peter the impetuous who would be the first to respond when Jesus asked his famous question, "Who do you say that I am?" To acknowledge someone in this way would have been a risky business. Jesus knew that his understanding of messiahship, my kingdom is not of this world, wouldn't be shared by the Jewish authorities, never mind the Roman conquerors. Admitting that he was the Messiah, others calling him the Messiah, would bring a threat not only to him, but to those who followed him. So it's interesting that he asks this question of the disciples when they are a long way away from Jerusalem, 2 days' walk beyond the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee and outside the Roman province of Judea. Caesarea Philippi, where they are when all this happens, is not to be confused with modern Caesarea, which is a Mediterranean port city originally built by the Romans as their seat of government. Caesarea Philippi is right up in the Golan Heights at the foot of Mount Hermon, where the Jordan rises. It was the site of a temple to Pan, hence the modern name of Banias. And today it's an architectural site in a natural park. It's a lovely place, peaceful, full of the sound of running water, with lots of trees and vegetation. And the mountain in the background, Mount Hermon, is really as beautiful as the Psalms say it is. But then it was a city that had been built by one of the local rulers, Philip the Tetrarch, who named it Caesarea Philippi, Caesarea of Philip, as a tribute to his patron. Philip's kingdom extended north from there, not south, into what's now Syria. So we can see that Jesus is having this very significant discussion with his disciples, far away from the centres of Roman and Jewish power, in something like privacy and safety, at least for now. So it's a safe place. He begins by asking them, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they reply, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." It's worth noticing that none of these people are particularly comfortable figures. They are prophetic people whose role was to rebuke, to challenge, to inspire. Remember John the Baptist in the desert. This was how the people were seeing Jesus, as God's mouthpiece against injustice in high places. But what about the disciples? Jesus presses them. Who do you say that I am? And Peter, on their behalf, makes a leap of faith. In recognizing Jesus as Messiah, he is saying that Jesus is not just a prophet, not just a mouthpiece, but the true king that God has sent to bring salvation to Israel and to the world. I said earlier that this recognition was earthly, political, even warlike. And we too need to realize that our faith, our following of Jesus, must encompass the challenges of our time, of life here and now, as well as looking forward to our hope of heaven. Indeed, the two are, I would say, utterly intertwined. We are part of the kingdom here. We will be part of the kingdom henceforward. Jesus goes on to name Peter as his rock, as the foundation of his church, his ecclesia, a word which in Greek always means a gathering of Christians and never an actual structure. And we are a part of that gathering, with Christians throughout the ages and Christians still to come. In Peter's first letter, he writes to the persecuted Christians in Asia Minor, as one stone to another, you might say. Come to him, a living stone, and like living stones, let yourselves be built into a spiritual house. You can see in this the direct link between Peter being told by Jesus that he is the rock and what he is encouraging people to become as they become more and more a part of Christ's church. Living stones being built into a spiritual house. It's a pity that wasn't the epistle reading for today. Those Christians that Peter was writing to faced huge changes and challenges in their world, just as we are facing today. Their strength to face those challenges came from God, just as ours does. And their example was Jesus, just as ours is. Just as the disciples' example was Jesus. Jesus, who was the Messiah, Jesus, who was the Son of God, who would indeed free his people, though not in the way they expected. Peter is also a great example to us, of course. Peter, who stepped boldly forward to proclaim his belief in Jesus as Messiah as he understood it, and yet further forward later, after the resurrection, as he came to understand more about Jesus as Lord and God. Peter's life was shaped by his faith and his willingness to respond to the challenges that brought. How are our lives shaped by our faith? What does it mean to be a part of that temple of living stones? Christ, its cornerstone, Peter, its foundation. Listen to some verses from today's epistle, from Romans. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. What would it look like if we were all indeed transformed by the renewing of our minds, so that we could discern the will of God, and if by love and grace and in the power of the Spirit we could do that will of God, and so be the people we were created to be? Let's ponder that in the week ahead.